new fear that I needed to face every day. Random, quiet, edgy white boys. Well, not super random, because one thing that came out of Columbine was that there was a certain type of young white male that was almost always behind these types of events, and they were more common at my school than any alleged thugs. See, much like the black parts feeding into the school, there were also poor white parts, and I noticed early on that the poor white kids at the school did not mix well with the ones from the nicer part of the suburbs. In fact, they were bullied incessantly by those kids, and some of those kids fit the description, if you will. Thankfully, I was pretty cool with all of them, but a few of them, not so much. A few of them seemed so angry and unapproachable, and people I didn't really want to engage with. They seemed frustrated with the world in ways that didn't make sense to me, because to me, they were still white, couldn't be that bad, right? Over the years, I found most of these guys on Facebook, and most of them, I would say, are living useful, healthy lives. Most of them actually have moderate to liberal politics at the end of the day. But a few of them still seem very, very angry. But these days, I kind of get it. Young men like Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, the perpetrators of the Columbine massacre, they, for whatever reason, felt very similar to these boys and men, and they just decided to respond in destructive and horrifying ways. And of course, you know, they weren't the first or the last.
Students also say that members of the small suburban gang bragged about their guns and ammo. One cyber chatter even recalled a previous warning that a certain El Caress wrote about preparing for the big April 20th. You're all gonna be sorry. Terrorism experts widely know that this time of year has been extremely violent throughout history. April 19th is the anniversary of many painful moments, from Waco to Ruby Ridge to Oklahoma City. And this past April 20th was the 110th anniversary of Adolf Hitler's birthday.
April 20th might just turn out to be a watershed date for an event such as what occurred in Colorado, and might in the future precipitate other types of events like this.
In 1999, Columbine was actually the fourth school shooting to get significant media coverage in around 4 years. A few years before, Kip Kinkle shot 20 students a day after murdering both his parents in Oregon. In that same year, 2 middle school students set up a sniper's nest and pulled the fire alarm at Westside Middle School in Arkansas, killing a teacher and 4 middle schoolers. Sometime later, there was another shooting in Georgia, or maybe it was back in Colorado, maybe it was Illinois. Fast forward some years, and it's a guy driving a car through a college in California. It's hard to say. There's so many, and to be honest, I personally stopped counting them the way I did back in 2012 in Newton, Connecticut, because that's when I realized that no matter what happened or how many people died, nothing was ever going to be done about this problem. In 2012, Adam Lanza used a Bushmaster XM15 to kill 27 people, 7 adults and 20 elementary school-age children. You would think that such an event would elicit national outrage strong enough to change gun laws in this country forever. That's what happened in other places where mass shootings occur. You would think that this nation would do some deep reflection on its engagement with guns, mental illness, and the ways young men, mostly white young men, are being socialized to make sure that something this senseless would never happen again. Surely someone would pay a price for the death of nearly 30 innocent people, mostly innocent children, innocent, mostly white children. But no. Instead, it actually birthed a new conspiracy movement. People like Alex Jones made harassing the families of the victims their new content formula, so much so that he was sued into relative obscurity. And once that happened, it became clear nothing would ever be done about these types of spree shootings, because it's more important to serve the interests of gun lobbyists and the ideology that represents it than to serve the people suffering from the gun violence themselves. Because to them, to white America especially, it's worth it.
I think it's worth it to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year, so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights.
A source tells CNN that Trump ally and the founder of Turning Points USA, Charlie Kirk, was shot at an event on a college campus in Utah.
Kirk was actually shot in the neck. The school adding that Kirk was 20 minutes into speaking
when shots were fired from a nearby building. According to the university, there are reports that Kirk was hit.
We can hear the audio where an audience member asked Kirk about mass shooters in America right before the gunshot. An audience member says, "Do you know how many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years?" Kirk says, "Counting or not counting gang violence," and that is when that single shot was fired.
It is my great dishonor to be the person that says this and breaks this to you on television, but Charlie Kirk, according to the President of the United States, is dead.
When I look at the very public, gruesome murder of Charlie Kirk, I can't help but realize that for the first time since 2012, I'm reminded of this brand of spectacle violence, somewhere between terrorism, true crime, political violence, and accelerationism. But, and here's an important part, almost always exclusively white, both in the victims, but also the perpetrators. It's actually not ideal to talk openly about the perpetrators of mass shootings. I'm going to break some social mores in this video, among many other things. The reason why I call it spectacle violence is because for the most part, the individuals that do these horrific acts do them for attention. It's why they write manifestos and send press kits to local media. Some have even live streamed their crimes. So talking about them publicly ends up being exactly what they want, and in many ways it motivates copycats. However, at a certain point, I feel like certain conversations need to be had, especially when some of the main people who need to hear these things are trying very hard to avoid the subject. The underlying forces behind these events, behind the murder of Charlie Kirk and even the attempted murder of Donald Trump, are things the right deeply wants to avoid, because talking about these things might force many on the right to critically engage with the ongoing struggle that the right is in with its own ideology and the tangible results that ideology leads to, which, to put simply, is rampant unnecessary death. And by rampant unnecessary death, I'm not just talking about the multiple genocides happening across the world through American imperialism, or the many preventable deaths happening because of poor health care or poverty in America right now. I'm genuinely just talking about normal white people that are dying or killing themselves greatly due to the ideology that the right promotes throughout this country. I believe many modern conservatives, particularly the men, are in a death cult. It's not a hot take to speak to how the party of Trump thrives on the pain and suffering of others, but today, for this video, I want to spend time on the real byproduct of that. The fact that the biggest body counts, at least here in the States, is actually other white people, and that the cult works extremely hard, often using figures like Charlie Kirk to hide this reality, or maybe make it seem like it's all worth it, as we see them do with his death in particular. I had no desire or intention to talk about Kirk because I try my best to avoid these types of headaches, but in the wake of his death, the right has tried to turn him into Martin Luther King, and Charlie Kirk directly insulted Martin Luther King's legacy.
Yeah, and the Civil Rights Act, though, let's be clear, created a beast, and that beast has now turned into an anti-white weapon.
Yeah, and that's the reality.
So there's a need for some direct pushback and response in this regard. Also, I have to admit, I'm a bit fearful of the response this might get from the right. They seem to feel like this one time, nobody should disagree with their views of this guy or make fun of the fact that he died, that nobody should make jokes about a person who was overtly hateful and ugly to them. Mind you that in the days after the death of George Floyd, conservatives created the George Floyd Challenge on social media, where they took pictures of themselves mocking Floyd's last moments before his death. And to this day, they are so obsessed with mocking him that they're still keeping him alive through memes and AI. But somehow, Charlie Kirk is where we draw the line. So you guys got that one, sure. With that said, I will forewarn you, this is going to be a pretty gruesome, ugly, hard to watch video at times. I'm going to talk candidly and maybe even flippantly about death and self-harm and mental illness and mass murder and all the isms. While I have some hopeful things to speak to by the end, this is definitely a video that will make you feel shitty at times, because it made me feel shitty making it. But it needs to be done. It needs to be known years from now, when we finally are out of this situation, that many people saw this nonsense for what it was, and will hopefully be there to inform those who don't know any better just who Charlie Kirk was and the greater context in which he lived. Because these ugly times won't last forever, and historical record is needed lest we carelessly repeat avoidable mistakes. So let's talk about Charlie Kirk and the cult that killed him. Part 1. The origins of the culture war.
The American family, liberty, freedom, the Constitution, our history, veterans. That's what we're conserving. You are on the precipice of the most important culture war. Young men do not know how to control themselves. Ladies, would you agree? Oh, don't worry. I'm going to do the whole other side of this in a second, so you better be ready. You better be ready. They're like, oh, yeah. It's going to be an equal opportunity offender.
To understand Charlie Kirk in totality, we first need to understand that he isn't the first, nor will he be the last of his kind. In fact, he's part of a long-standing tradition of right-wing provocateurs whose job is not doing politics the right way, as some dumb asshole might say on their podcast. But instead, he was furthering a far-right agenda in this country, and this is apparent in just how far the right has been able to shift the Overton window in terms of what are even acceptable things to say or believe in our modern society. For example, no American would have supported or even seriously engaged with the idea of a president getting a third term ever since FDR did it nearly 75 years ago. It's literally in the Constitution. However, for weeks now, as of recording, Republicans, even Republican officials, have been seriously priming Americans for the argument that Trump should get a third term and how that's actually okay under the Constitution.
We had longer odds in 16 and longer odds in 24 than we got in 28. And President Trump will be the President of the United States, and the country needs him to be President.
Is it constitutional for President Trump to run for a third term? He's teasing that.
If you read the Constitution, it says it's not, but if he says he has some different circumstances that might be able to go around the Constitution, but that's up to him. We got a long way to go.
But you're open to it.
Well, I think that there's going to have to be an evaluation.
Not even George W. Bush, who was very, very bad. The fact that he's the last Republican president before Trump has managed to whitewash his past. He was not good. Don't let the old painting sad man stuff fool you. But as bad as he was, he never would have thought of sending troops in the military and the National Guard to American cities and states that he didn't like. But Trump is threatening to send American troops to low-crime cities like Portland, stating that they need to be cleaned up, ignoring the much more dangerous cities in red states. And the right eats this all up. Mind you, and this will be a recurring theme, none of this is really helping anyone, let alone many of the working-class white people who voted for Trump. While Trump's appeal is more diverse than people like to believe, this is just something you have to acknowledge. At the end of the day, his base, like all Republicans for years, has been among uneducated whites and rural white people. People who, for the most part, have never benefited from his policies. For example, regarding the ongoing government shutdown that is still in place as of writing, the shutdown is happening because Republicans want to make major cuts to many social safety net programs, which will impact poorer Americans. And despite the efforts of Republicans for decades to make it seem like the poor are only undeserving black and brown people leeching off the government, the majority of Americans receiving those benefits are white. And these same white people will support Trump literally to their death. Why is this the case, and what does it have to do with Charlie Kirk? To make sense of that, I want to dive into the concept of the culture war, because it's through the culture war that all of this is possible. And they know this because Charlie Kirk actually named his college tour the Culture War Tour. So switching gears for a second. If you're at all on Twitter and social media in the months and weeks preceding the murder of Charlie Kirk, you probably caught wind of two other tragic killings. The killings of Anthony Metcalf and Irina Zarutska both went viral on Twitter, as these were two young white lives ended by black men. Both of those black men, mind you, faced immediate legal charges. I want to be clear. It's genuinely sad, and I send condolences to their families regardless of the circumstances of their death. It's tragic when people die like this, especially when their deaths have become flashpoints in culture wars online. Austin Metcalf's father in particular showed an inspirational level of grace in the aftermath of his son's death that should be commended. Unfortunately, that father's grace is not being copied by the American right, who used his son's death to talk about black fatigue. Not the original use of that term, by the way, but a racist version that is basically white people getting tired of not being able to be openly racist. Similarly, Zarutska's death spurred legislative initiatives to reinstate and even expedite the death penalty in North Carolina, which, Yikes is really all I can say to that. And this is all after President Trump weaponized the deaths of white women at the hands of immigrants all through his campaign trail as a way to bolster his anti-immigrant